All right, so we get a lot of the questions about foot position with the squat. I just want to take a few minutes here to kind of clear up a few misunderstandings and what we look for as kind of the best way to get your foot in a stable position while you're squatting. So a lot of times what we see as people go down is that their weight is actually on the inside of their foot, but really we want it to be on the outside of the foot. So in the shoe, when you're in a shoe, it might be hard to tell if they're diving in or not. So if you have someone who might be struggling or might be falling into this, I think a good idea is to kind of take your shoes off and maybe even your socks off and kind of see what's going on at the foot. Okay, so I have a fairly normal arch. I mean, I don't dive really far in when I'm at rest, and I don't have a super high arch either. So I have a fairly normal foot. But what we see as we squat is a lot of people, even with a normal foot, as they get down, you'll see their kind of foot rolling in. And often that happens at the same time as their knee collapsing in and then their hip going into internal rotation and abduction, or this whole kind of, we call it medial collapse. But often it can start at the hip, but it can also start down here at the foot. So what we're going to talk about today is just like a stable foot position. What does that look like? So what we want is some people call it 3 points of contact position. There's a lot of different terms for it, but basically we want to try to create this arch in our foot, but we don't want to go so high that our big toe is coming off the ground. So a lot of people who are really focusing on pushing out, their whole foot's going to come off the ground. And obviously if we're squatting, it's not going to be very stable. Okay, so we want to have an arch. Okay, we want to keep that arch, have some space between your arch and the ground, but we don't want the big toe to be coming up off. Okay, so we want to strive to maintain that. So again, what happens here could be dictated by the knee position and the hip position, or vice versa. So as I'm squatting, if I go down and I'm able to maintain that nice arched position, then great, I have a good, strong, stable base. But say I like to be really wide in my stance and really turned out, I might not have the hip mobility to get my knee out far enough, and I might go into this kind of collapsing position. And that's what we'll see with some of our power lifters or people who are just have some mobility issues at the hip, is that they're so turned out is that their foot dives in. And some people just have a flat foot, normal. I have plenty of patients that I see in the physical therapy clinic who just come in looking like that. What they don't realize is that with training, with effort, they can from the hip kind of create this outward knee position, and as you wind everything up, that arch comes off the ground. Okay, so that's what we're looking for as far as foot position goes. No matter if you have like a nice if you have a straightforward position with your foot, sort of turned out, or a dramatic turnout of the foot, while you squat, you still want to maintain that arch position. I would say, almost as a general rule, the more narrow your stance, the more straightforward your foot's going to be. As I get wider in the stance, I'm going to turn my toes out. If I get super wide, I might turn my toes out even more. But then that requires even more hip mobility so that I don't dive into this position. I got to get everything going out to create that arch. Okay. So if I do that in my squat guide, so say someone struggles with that, there's a few different ways. You can just stand up next to a wall and have a wall here, and I can kind of work on pushing out, and I can do some ankle mobility. But oftentimes the wall will kind of run into your knee if you need to get that knee further out to create that. So the cool thing about the squat guide, no matter how I set up, so for me, I'd kind of set up here. That's about how much toe turnout I like. So as I push out, I can kind of hinge my foot off of this outside rail, and I can create that arch. So one mobility exercise I can do just in the squat guide is just work on my ankle and foot mobility by using this as a way to hinge or mobilize my ankle, and I can work on getting into there so that as I go down into my squat, I can push up. Some people are extremely tight. What you'll notice is as they squat, their feet start to turn out. So two things could be happening. One, they don't have the ankle mobility to get down low enough, and that causes them to turn out. Or, if they're going down and you see their foot moving a lot, they're just shifting their weight too far onto their toes, and that allows their ankle to move out. So as far as foot position goes, again, we want to create an arch in our foot. No matter how much turnout you have, whether you're straightforward or really ducked out with your feet, you want to maintain that arch so that up the chain things look good. If you're diving in here, there's no doubt that your knee's starting to dive in, your hip's diving in, and you're not going to look great or squat with very much proficiency. Sidetracked.